Hello, this is Greg Forster with the American Academy of Sciences and Letters, and here with me is Clifford Brangwynne, who is the June K. Wu 92 Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering at Princeton. Cliff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's nice to be here.
Tell us, what are some underappreciated ways in which work in your field contributes to human understanding and to human well-being?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I think my field, I think like a lot of fields that are doing interesting things that are pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and its impacts on society, I think are integrating lots of different areas. And my field in particular, I work in bioengineering and cell biophysics, cell biology, the organization of cells, and trying to understand how that all works. And we really bring together lots of different related areas to understand all of that. So we've been studying these structures in living cells and how they assemble through a process called phase separation. And that's an idea that has a long history in physics and in general, and then in the specific space of materials physics and soft matter physics. So those ideas have come into cell biology, and we've discovered that class of structures assembled by a process called liquid-liquid phase separation. I think that that ends up having impacts on uh, genetics and areas, many different areas of biology, chromosome biology, aging, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases. And I think that because so many different fields have kind of converged in this space, it there's sort of something, I don't know, meta that's happening, which is, you've got a whole bunch of geneticists that are very deep in their space and they know, everything about that space. And then they now have to talk to polymer physicists, and they have to talk to material scientists, and they have to talk to computational scientists, and vice versa, right? The folks that are coming from the physics side have to speak these different languages, and then think about applications in cancer and with physicians. I think that in my area, that I think has broader impacts in the sense that it requires coming to the table with tremendous humility, which is not something that is always at play in in academia, right? So there's no way that any one person can know all these things, and there's no way one can be expert in all these things. So you've really got to leave your ego behind in a way and say, look, there's no way I'm going to be, deep expert in let's say these advanced physics theories or applications in thinking about sequence space for proteins or RNAs and genomics and all these things. And we find that really refreshing. It just means everybody shows up and says, "Hey, here's what I know. How does it intersect with what you know?" And I think that in society, certainly in academy and in society, I think that that's something we all need right now. We all need a deeper appreciation of all the things that we do not know. If I think about the space, if I could quantify the space of things that can be known and are known, and then the space of those things that I actually know myself, it is humbling, and I think that's something that we need all to appreciate a lot more.
A while back, one observer remarked that the natural sciences, and I think this person meant engineering as well as the natural sciences, are the only
Mhm,
part of the university where the different disciplines work together efficiently because
mhm,
they're not in turf wars nearly as
mhm.
much. There's
Yeah.
recognition of where the boundary of one discipline stops and the boundary of the other discipline starts. I wonder, since I'm not in the natural sciences and haven't had direct contact,
Mm.
do you have a sense of that? Are there turf wars among the sciences, the natural sciences?
Well, I think that everybody has their disciplinary bias and identities. I actually just coincidentally made this comment in a lecture to some PhD students earlier today. there were 100 years ago, early 1900s thereabouts, there was a lot of interest in the ideas of physical chemistry in living cells, which is something that we're thinking about now as well. But back then, it was much more natural because people were not in these disciplinary silos. And the kind of colorful way that I said it to the students earlier was, we didn't get into this situation of kind of white knuckled gripping onto our disciplinary identities. Well, I'm a chemist and and so I think that can be really counterproductive. There's a nice quote from Richard Feynman that I'll sometimes share with folks around, nature doesn't know about these boundaries. Like, you say, hey, what's more important in cells? Is it physics or chemistry or mechanics or, the answer is yes, right? Nature doesn't know about these disciplinary boundaries. And I think that it's counterproductive. So in some ways I'm a disciplinary anarchist, even though I direct the Bioengineering Institute and I very much think about these things. But reality is all the interesting stuff is happening at disciplinary intersections. And I think if we, pay less attention to, staying in our lanes, again, coming at these conversations with tremendous humility and understanding that there's, a lot to human knowledge and we're never going to, be deeply expert in all areas of it. I think that's where the interesting things happen.
Fascinating to think that the accelerating accomplishments of science and engineering might be changing the landscape in terms of interdisciplinary
Hmm.
collaboration, which in a
Hmm.
way brings me to my next question, which is how would you describe the mission of the university and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's certainly timely and asking what is the purpose of a university in these times of increasing politicization and questions of free speech and education more broadly. Uh, in a world of AI and information rich age where people are, I think, very very clear data on people reading much less. There's a headline from an article that I found amusing. To read books in college, well, it helps to have read one in high school. And at Princeton University, obviously there's tremendously talented students that we have, but I think that these issues are coming up all over the place. So it's an interesting time for academia. Lots of headwinds from lots of places, and the recent federal changes are severe on that front. Um, I would say that Princeton University, their mission statement speaks of advancing learning through world class scholarship, research, and teaching, with emphasis on undergraduate and doctoral education, and a commitment to serving the nation and the world. I think that those are certainly noble aspirations, and I subscribe to them. Especially in the big picture of commitment to serving the nation and the world. I think though, if you just step back and say what should the mission of the university in the broadest way, any university, what should it be? Um, I think that we have to be a place where ideas come together and in some cases collide and intersect, and we have cordial discussions with in a respectful way around ideas that we may not like, we may even hate, and we may think the other person doesn't have any idea what they're talking about, but we're going to respectfully engage. And through the process of discussion and engagement and sort of kicking the tires as a crucible for different ideas, I think we're going to get to the best ideas. We're going to see where the flaws are in our own logic. We're going to understand in a way that many colleagues here, Daniel Kahneman and other pioneers in the space have thought about, the gaps in our thinking. There's blind spots in our thinking, and we all have this notion that we have an omniscient understanding. We see things very clearly, and reality is there's gaps in our thinking. There's logics in our thinking. There's biases in our thinking, and I think only through constructive dialogue are we going to see those and be able to refine our arguments and maybe realize we're wrong. Hey, gee, I'm wrong. I mean, that happens. I sometimes say that to people. I'm always prepared to be wrong. I mean, I'll argue as as strongly and forcefully as anyone else when I really think that my ideas are have strength and grounding. But one has to be prepared to be wrong, and I think that uh, um, this takes us a little bit back to the earlier question around my field and interdisciplinarity and humility. We've got to come into any conversation with respectful caution that, gee, we might be wrong, and we're going to listen to ideas and see where we might be wrong, and if it's the other person's wrong, it's our I think imperative to respectfully guide them into what seems like the better version of the idea. I think a lot, I would say that the university, should be a place where that happens. I mean, I tell you, it's not going to happen out there on Twitter. It's not going to happen on Fox News or MSNBC. It's not going to happen in the societal silos set up by socioeconomic stratification or, people that are of this religion or that. I mean, so where is it going to happen? Where are those conversations going to happen? It's not happening in any of those places. I think for me personally, one of the few places it happens is in Uber rides. I get in an Uber, and it's a pretty reasonable cross section of all different types of people driving and riding, and I end up having productive conversations. But unfortunately, in the university, we have slipped away from it being a place where people can speak completely openly about different ideas, and with an understanding that those ideas will be respected, and there will be a thoughtful exchange even with folks that disagree. So I think that's got to be a central part of the mission of the university in service of the country and service of the world, because again, it's not happening anywhere else.
The university as institutionalized Uber ride, in the sense
I
that
love it. This is
in the
great.
sense that you have the freedom to speak, because in that Uber, you can say what you think, and you know that, you're going to get out of that Uber and nobody's going to track you down, right? And try and hurt
Yeah,
you for what you said. And the
yeah,
university needs to be a place where that's protected. That
that's
life of
right.
the mind is so difficult to maintain, but we need it to grow and learn as human beings for the reasons you were saying. When I was
Mhm.
trained as a social scientist, one of our methodology professors had the class recite together two three-word phrases. He said, "You repeat after me. I was wrong." And he made us all say, "I was wrong." And now I want you to say something, "I don't know." And we all had to say, he said, "Okay, now you've said those, so you have no excuse that you didn't know how to say it. You know how to say it now, so say it
Yeah.
when you need to say it." That really stuck with me.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Yeah, that we all have got to, again, got to come in with that kind of humility and and ability to speak freely. It's funny, this Uber analogy is actually is quite apt. I mean, I think about it. I was just dropped off the other day, and I shared something somewhat personal in the Uber ride, and almost like the kind of thing one thinks about, deep secrets with a therapist. Not quite that level, but there's conversations one can have in those contexts because it's a driver. You're not going to see them again. They're not going to say, hey, this person thinks that, isn't that terrible, or whatever. And I mean, we need to have places where people can speak freely, and I think it's just critical. So yeah,
And the university can sustain those relationships over time.
that's right.
Cliff, let me ask you my last question. The university, as you've mentioned, has many different, aspirations.
Hmm.
Two of them are pursuing truth for its own sake and
Hmm.
making truth useful in the world. And sometimes
Hmm.
it's hard to maintain a good balance between truth for its own sake and making
Yeah,
truth useful in the world. Where would you say we're doing a good job at that, and where would you say we might need to improve?
I think this is a really interesting question. Um, I'll start maybe with some just thoughts on um, a more sort of micro version or a particular place where this, comes to mind. So I'm based in the School of Engineering and Applied Science at Princeton. And so engineering and applied science, it's, as the name implies, right, we're thinking about knowledge, a knowledge base, especially at a place like Princeton that has a long history of embracing, the creation of knowledge and a basic understanding of how the world works at the level of physics and chemistry, et cetera. And then the application of that knowledge in in engineering context for society and so forth. I think that so again, this is just a little bit of micro on that, but we have a balance, and I direct an institute at Princeton that's called the Omen Darling Bioengineering Institute. We just got off the ground. We're about to move into a new building, and we talk about the interplay. I don't think those things are really separable. So, again, this is a micro, but I think one can think about immediate extrapolations. Basic science, like how do cells work, we still don't understand that. Sometimes I talk to people not in the biology world. They say, "Well, gee, we know the genome, and we have all these things." Turns out we really don't understand how that works. Proof of that is, we don't know how Alzheimer's works, even at a basic mechanistic level. These diseases, many of them are just devastating, and there's no cure. So basic understanding, but then in the next breath, how do we take that understanding and think about applications, whether it's medical devices, things for the environment, things for materials, energy, et cetera. And then in our institute, we talked a lot about the feedback between those applications, the application space, and then, hey, maybe some of those applications go back into advancing the frontiers of knowledge, and then we have this kind of virtuous cycle. So that's a specific thing in the domain. I think more generally, though, I worry a little bit about if this balance is not quite right, or there's been in recent years perhaps an overemphasis on the academy, the universities. It certainly has a huge impact, and a lot of folks coming out, the folks that do go to college. Of course, not everybody in the United States goes to college, but the folks that go to college come out and have an impact in culture, media, law, technology, and that has big impacts throughout the country, and we've seen that in different ways. I worry a little bit, though, where the program of the university becomes, maybe it's a little uh, too self-confident in a way about the impact and the vision of what should be happening in society and the impacts that's going to have. I mean, I just, I talk to people. I come from, a pretty working class background. I always, we have plumbers and electricians and painters in my family, and none of my parents' generation went to college, et cetera. Sometimes we talk about things that are front and center in the academy and the university, and for those folks, it's just very, these discussions are very divorced from their immediate, what matters to them on the ground, and I think, again, we should be thoughtful in the university, playing leadership roles in bringing what we think are the best ideas that are road tested in conversation, in debate, in dialogue, in an environment that supports discussions in an open, respectful way. Taking leadership of the best ideas moving out and having an impact on society. But I don't think that the mission of the university necessarily should be that. I mean, if people are cycling through this environment where there's active dialogue, respectful discussions, that then will move out into the world, into the marketplace, and I think we'll have open dialogue, and the best ideas will emerge. But I worry a little bit about the balance. I think we've moved a little bit away from universities focusing on the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, and a little bit more on, advancing what is viewed as a mission for influencing society in ways that are I think there's discussions around what is the best way to do that. So that's a little bit oblique, but I think that it's my sense is that we're not quite on the mark in some of those ways.
The danger is we assume that we know more than we really do about what the world needs and how we can affect it. And there's
That's right.
always been a temptation for the academy to lose touch people have been complaining about the ivory tower for as long as there have been
That's right.
ivory
Yeah.
towers. But I
Yeah.
wonder if in the new world of social sorting, there
Yeah.
isn't an even greater danger of losing touch than there has been.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Again, I mean, I keep coming back to this word humility, right? I think one can take a leadership role in being a thought leader and bringing constructive dialogue and what seem to be ideas that make sense and bring that certainly to colleagues out in the world, to the Thanksgiving table. That's what we should be doing. On the other hand, we got to show up to those conversations with a lot of humility and respect for the life learning and different experiences that people have in different domains. And I think that that's again a place where I'm not sure we've gotten the balance right over the years.
Yeah. Humility is not just a moral virtue, it's an intellectual virtue.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
great
right.
note. Thank you, Cliff. Really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks, Greg. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.